Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Welcome to the weekly Top 3, the top 3 things on our mind here at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the week of July 28th, 2025. The weekly Top 3 is a regular segment on The Michael Dukes Show. The show broadcasts on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as well as via streaming audio from the show's website, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. I join Michael weekly in the first hour of Tuesday's show from 6:10 to 7 a.m. for a discussion between the two of us about our 3 issues. We post the podcast of our discussion following the show on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, also on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets website, as well as the project's page on national blog site, medium.com. You can find past episodes of the weekly Top 3 also at the same locations. Keep in mind that in addition to these podcasts, during the week, you can also follow and participate in the discussion with us of these and other issues affecting Alaska's fiscal and economic condition by following us on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook page and through our posts on Twitter. This week, our top 3 issues are these. First, we explain how a recent op-ed demonstrates why some legislators seem not to understand how Alaska's oil taxes work. Second, we explain why Shelley Hughes potentially has a significant leg up on other candidates on fiscal issues in the coming governor's race. And third, we explain why we think, with one exception, a recent op-ed by Kevin McCabe makes a significant contribution towards understanding the K-12 issue. And now, let's join Michael.
All right, Brad. Well, we got some great topics today. Let's dive into it and get started. We're going to start off with the weekly top 3. Topic number 1. It seems like some legislators just don't seem to understand how oil taxes work. Again, you've been on this topic for a while, but it just still seems like nobody's listening. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, kind of thing. Let's get started here on this.
Well, maybe repetition will help. That's why it keeps popping up occasionally and in the top 3. This segment was triggered by an op-ed that House Minority Leader Mia Costello wrote in this week's ADN, and I'm sure it will appear in other publications. I think I saw it in Must Read somewhere along the way also. The title of it is Alaska Has the Chance to Seize Prosperity with the Big Beautiful Bill. And it talks about various things that the federal One Big Beautiful Act accomplishes with respect to Alaska, particularly focusing on opening up NPRA, additional leasing in NPRA and in ANWR on the North Slope, and the potential that brings for oil development. The thing that, if I had a magic wand that I could get all 60 legislators and the governor to understand is it is good that we will have additional production that results in jobs, that results in additional development. It lowers the costs of taps because more volume through taps lowers the per unit cost of taps. It opens up new potential for discovering additional fields up on the slope. So that's all good. But the thing that people are overlooking is that it hurts state revenues in not only in the near term, but as we're discovering this decade and seeing the impact that SB 21 is having in the current decade, in the environment of the current decade, not only in the near term, but also in the medium term and perhaps in the long term, depending upon how long this goes on for. And the reason it hurts state revenues is because two factors. One, there is no state royalty from federal lands. Now, I understand that as part of the One Big Beautiful Act, Representative Begich got a provision that increases royalty sharing from NPRA and increases royalty sharing from ANWR. But the royalty sharing from NPRA is still subject to the local preference. That is, the royalties, even though it's increased, the royalties are still subject to the federal law that requires that they be spent on the slope, with slope communities, local communities on the slope. And so the fact that royalties will increase at some point, and it's something like 7 years down the line that this increase kicks in, the fact that royalties increase doesn't help state revenues, certainly in the near term, because it doesn't kick in for a while, or the immediate, or depending upon how you define it, the intermediate term, because it still doesn't kick in for 7 years or so. But even when it kicks in, those royalties are going to be subject to the local preference rule. And so, at least from NPRA, the state isn't going to benefit from any federal royalties. We're going to continue to, from a royalty standpoint, continue to have state royalties. And as the 10-year forecast points out, those remain flat. Those state royalties remain flat. We're from a state standpoint, we're replacing the declining production curve, but we're not adding to it. And so over the course of the 10-year period that's in the current DOR projection, state revenues from state royalties, revenue from royalties stays relatively flat over that period. We don't get any from the federal lands. The second thing is that the additional drilling, the additional spending that goes on, and the development of new volumes combine to result in a decline in production taxes. We went over this last week, but production taxes hit a low in the late point of the projection period. Production taxes historically been $1 billion or so, plus or minus. They hit a low of 220 million in the late part of the current 10-year forecast period. They sort of bumped back up to 400 million the last couple of years, but that's still less than half than what they were in 2024. So this additional development that everybody's excited about, legitimately so, but this additional development that everybody's excited about isn't a prosperity for state revenue standpoint. It is in fact a hit to state revenues. Now, the legislature can get out in front of that and can readjust oil taxes. I mean, we readjusted oil taxes in 2013 because they were overtaking from producers,
right,
and disincentivizing incentive in the state. Now we've got a situation where we are undertaking from producers, and we're hurting the state by doing that. So state revenues by doing that. And so the state legislature can get out in front of that and make some adjustments to the way that SB 21 works by making some changes that amortize the impact of additional investments over an extended period, make sure that the state realizes additional production tax revenues as we have additional production coming on. But the legislature can do that, but the legislature hasn't yet done that. So the way SB 21 is operating, it's reducing production tax revenues over the projection period. Here's the key to that. It's not like we're going to be reducing state spending proportionately to that reduction in revenues. Not even the Republicans have come up with proposals on how you would reduce state spending in the same fashion that revenues are going down. So what we're doing by not addressing production taxes, not addressing that hit that comes from additional development, is we're going to increase the burden on personal taxes. We're going to continue to take heavily from the PFD until perhaps it's gone, and then we're going to kick over into other personal taxes. So the legislators who are saying, yay, OBBA opens things up, it's going to be happy days are here again, they're not understanding, I don't think, they're not understanding what that influx of investment, that influx of spending dollars in the oil industry, that influx of new volumes, which are subject to a lower tax rate under SB 21, they're not understanding what that's going to do to state revenues. That it's not, state revenues from production tax don't even hold steady, they go down because of the way that those additional spending is going to affect SB 20 is going to affect production taxes. So it's that and the consequence of that is increased. I mean, what they're essentially cheering for is increased personal taxes, because that's what's going to happen in order to fill the gap that's created by the declining oil taxes. So I think legislators who are getting out there and cheering OBBA, I understand why they're doing it. I understand that the industry certainly is encouraging them to do it, and the industry is certainly saying, well, this will be good. We get additional leases in NPRA. We can develop step outs in NPRA. We can get additional volumes out of NPRA. And I understand what they're hearing from the producers in that regard. But they need to understand what's going on with oil taxes. They need to understand in particular what's going on in with production taxes. And they need to understand that all of this additional development is creating a situation in which production taxes will continue to decline, which boomerangs back on the need for additional personal taxes.
I think it's interesting in reading the article, reading the opinion piece. I mean, in nowhere there does she talk about new revenues or anything else. It seems like all the talk around this is very aspirational, right? I mean, oh, look at all the great things that are going to come because of this. And you pointed them out: new building, new growth, new job employment, things like that. But again, it's not the cure-all. I think a lot of them are looking at it as if this will be the cure-all. This specific article doesn't talk about revenues, but we've seen others that say, look at all the money that'll be flowing into the state, when the answer is there's not, because of all the reasons you just outlined. And so I don't know why they keep going back to this and banging on that drum specifically. I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong. This is good stuff, but it's not the solution that they keep seeming to point towards.
Well, yeah, she doesn't talk about revenues, but she doesn't talk about state revenues, but she also doesn't talk about the adverse impact, the negative impact on state revenues. I mean, it's almost as if state revenues sort of remain neutral, or it'll be good because generally good, but it's not. I mean, the way SB 21 was set up was to restart investment in Alaska, and people came up with various ideas. One was to allow the immediate deductibility of capital costs instead of the amortization, the immediate deductibility of capital costs. Another was what's called GVR, gross value reduction, which is to charge, to have a lower tax rate on new production as opposed to old production. And so as new production replaces old production, the production tax goes down, assuming the volumes are equal. The production tax goes down because you're replacing with new volumes, or replacing the old production at lower tax rates than the old production had. And then we've got the per barrel credits that sort of kick in the late part of the period and start impacting taxes as well. All of that was to get investment. Okay, we attracted a bunch of investment. We're attracting with the opening of NPRA and the potential opening of ANWR, you're attracting more investment. Yay, that's good. But the way that SB 21's set up is all of these three incentives that various people threw out at various times that got stacked in there. The cumulative impact of those incentives is to drive revenues from production tax down during high investment periods, high spending periods. And that was, we saw some of that in the last decade, but it wasn't to the degree that we're seeing it in this decade. And so what you have is a situation in which production taxes are going up, or production volumes are going up, something like 40% overall, with the projected kick in from the NPRA volumes going up something like 40%, but production taxes, revenues from production taxes, going down something like 55%. And that hole that's being created by the production taxes going down is going to have to be filled from someplace. And it's been filled over the last few years by PFD cuts.
So your overall solution to this is a refactoring of the tax of this SB 21 to account for some of this.
Yeah, we've got to go back into SB 21 and fulfill its promise. The promise of SB 21 was the state would sort of bide its time while some investment was made, and then investment would result in additional production, and that additional production, the assumption was the additional production would result in additional revenues to the state. But it's not happening. The reason it's not happening is in
Right.
part because the additional production is coming from federal lands where we get no royalties, and the additional production is coming with costs that are driving down production taxes. So we need to go back into SB 21 and rejigger it to fulfill the promise of as production increases, revenues to the state increase as well.
Kim says, Brad is a Debbie Downer this morning. No, it's just the truth. I mean, that's the thing. Look, I mean, I can understand being excited about opening and exploring ANWR and NPRA. Those do bring some positives, but they also bring with them some negatives. And it's not so much that Mia in this article is talking about, how the state's going to be rolling in dough or anything is like that. But again, by avoiding the problem with it and acknowledging that there is an issue, we're exacerbating it. We're going to cause, it'll be 4 years from now. Somebody will say, how come we're not making all this money? We're pumping all this oil. How come we're not making all this money? And it's because nobody looked at the downside of it and said, well, maybe something should change. Because again, historically, if you look at the who's on whose side, the Republicans have always been defensive of the oil industries in that regard, which, I mean, I could see there are the goose that lays the golden egg in the state. But sometimes if you're going to do, to continue the analogy, if you're going to do animal husbandry, sometimes you have to do things that are not pleasant for the goose, to make sure that it stays warm and fat and dry and happy. And this might be one of those times, Brad.
Yeah, I think the thing that triggered me, Michael, on this was the title, Alaska has the chance to seize prosperity. Well, we're not going to seize prosperity if the consequence of this is we have to increase individual taxes, personal taxes, in order to make up for the additional hole that's being created out of production tax declines. That's going to be, rather than seizing prosperity, it's going to be seizing problems for the state and problems for the citizens of the state, particularly if we continue to have a personal tax structure as we do with PFD cuts that take money only from Alaskans, don't have any sort of the contribution coming from non-residents. So you're going to have non-residents coming in. I mean, just picture this. You're going to have non-residents coming in, working on the additional oil field development, working on the additional activities that are going on, taking a significant share of the benefits of that in terms of jobs and in terms of wages for non-residents. They're not contributing to the solution under the current tax structure. The production taxes, which are supposed to benefit Alaskans, are in decline because of the way SB 21 is operating through this period. And so only Alaskans, by using PFD cuts, only Alaskans are making up this hole. The non-residents are fat, dumb, and happy. They get additional jobs. They take their paychecks. They go home, don't make any contributions to the state revenue. And Alaskans are having to make up the hole that's being created by the decline in production taxes. So I think that's not prosperity. That is additional problems from a state fiscal standpoint. And so I think the thing Mia doesn't talk about revenues to the state, but when she uses the words seize prosperity, it's only prosperity for a few, the way SB 21 operates. For the state as a whole, and for the citizens of the state who are going to have to fill in this hole being created by declining production taxes, it's not prosperity. It is additional burden that this is going to create, and we don't get royalty out of it either. So it's additional burden that's being created by the additional development. I'm not saying the additional development is bad. I'm not saying we ought not to do the additional development, but we need to structure SB 21 just like we did back in the early 2010s when we had a problem with oil taxes. It was driving investment away from Alaska. People were investing other places instead of Alaska. Just as we did in the early 2010s, we need to recognize the problem for what it is and come in and develop the solution to it. And so Alaskans can share in this prosperity in terms of reducing the burden of personal taxes. Instead of increasing the burden of personal taxes, reducing the burden of personal taxes on Alaska families.
And that's where the pushback's going to come. The same legislators that are touting the prosperity of it are going to push back on any kind of change to SB 21 because, again, they fear killing the golden goose, because that's the first thing that the oil companies say is, well, we'll just take our bat and ball and go somewhere else.
No, it's different circumstances now in the industry as a whole, different circumstances in Alaska than in the early 2010s. We needed to correct ACEs. ACEs had gone way the hell too far,
right,
in terms of taking a share. There is space, and we've talked about it on the show, 500 to 600 million. There is space in what's going on in the oil industry to correct taxes without driving investment away. But we need to take it, or else that burden of declining taxes, production taxes, is going to fall back on Alaska personal taxes.
Number two, Brad, number two of the weekly top three, and that is apparently Shelley Hughes. She's thrown her hat in the ring. She makes number 7 of, I guess, potentially 9 is what we're looking at right now. You say Shelley Hughes has a ready-made fiscal platform. The question is, will she use it? What do you mean?
Okay, so you and I often go back on the show and discuss the 2021 Legislative Fiscal Policy Working Group recommendations and sort of use those as a template for how we need to address our fiscal situation. It's sort of the all-in approach, right? A little bit of spending cuts, some restructuring of the PFD to go to POMV 50/50, some new revenues, a constitutional a change in the spending cap to be effective, constitutionalization of the PFD. There's a list of things in the 2021 Legislative Fiscal Policy Working Group recommendations that I thought were outstanding and form the basis of trying to get our fiscal house in order. It's not just the 2021 Fiscal Policy Working Group. You can find the same sort of thread back in Governor Dunleavy's fiscal year 2019. I think it was 2020. Maybe it was 2020. 10-year forecast. You can find the thread of this sort of all-in approach, a little bit from everything, a little bit of oil taxes, a little bit from everything to get the fiscal policy back in shape. Shelley Hughes has a perfect opportunity. I mean, Shelley's theme so far in her announcement has been she can bring people together, she can work out solutions. She's a combiner, she's a consensus builder, she's a policy maker in the sense of getting everybody in a room and working on it. Shelley Hughes was a key component of the Fiscal Policy Working Group. There were 2 from the Senate, 2 from each body, with alternates. The 2 from the Senate were Lyman Hoffman, and 2 from the majority, 2 from the minority. The 2 from the Senate were Senate majority at the time were Lyman Hoffman and Shelley Hughes. Shelley was part of building that consensus, that sort of all-in approach. And I think that gives her a leg up in the campaign. I think she can point to the Fiscal Policy Working Group as an example of where she has participated and where she was helped. She helped shape a consensus agenda, a consensus body of recommendations to go forward on fiscal policy. And I think she can show that I think she can use it to demonstrate that she has some history with working on fiscal policy solutions. And as governor, Dunleavy never picked this up. But as governor, she would pick it up and she would push it as an agenda for solving the fiscal situation. And I think during the campaign, people are going to realize that we need a solution to our fiscal situation going forward, that we need to get Alaska's fiscal house in order, particularly when you look at the 10-year forecast and you look at the deficits that don't quit over the period. And you look at things like declining production tax revenues and increasing personal taxes as a result of declining revenues from other sources. And people, look at spending patterns and see, potential for spending increases and worry about having an effective cap on that. So I think this is a perfect, frankly, fiscal platform for Shelley and others. I mean, I think other candidates ought to adopt it as well, but I think Shelley, as a member of the Fiscal Policy Working Group, has a leg up on being able to use that as one of the centerpieces of her campaign. I was surprised to be honest, in her announcement that she didn't use it in that way. To my understanding, I read everything about her announcement. She didn't mention the fiscal policy working group at all. She mentioned pieces of it. One piece was using POMV 50/50, which essentially shares inflation proofing between the two, between the PFD part and the portion that goes to government. She mentioned pieces of it, but she didn't mention as an example of how she in the past has helped bring things together, or as a set piece, as a centerpiece of her fiscal policy. I think it's sort of sitting there and an opportunity for her, and hopefully she will use it, because I think that has the potential to drive the discussion about fiscal policy in the campaign. Candidates who endorse it, who talk about fiscal policy and talk about that solution, the all-in solution as a centerpiece, I think are positioned then when elected to the new legislature, are elected to become part of the group that works that through the legislature and gets it to the governor. And I think candidates ought to be endorsing and supporting the fiscal policy working group recommendations. But I think Shelley has the opportunity not only to use it to propel her campaign, but also to use it to bring a focused discussion around fiscal policy and around these solutions as part of everybody's campaign, as part of the overall election cycle. So I encourage her to do it. I encourage other candidates to do it as well. But because she was part of it, because she was a member of the working group, because she spent time and contributed heavily to the recommendations, I think, and spoke about them highly afterwards. I think it's something that she can take the lead on. That frankly, there are no other candidates currently in the election cycle who can position themselves in the same way.
Well, so far from what I've seen, no other candidates, including Bernadette Wilson, who's been on the program. I asked her about the fiscal policy, and she didn't really have any knowledge of it. Shelley's got the intimate knowledge; she was part of it, but none of the candidates are really talking about the long-term fiscal concerns of the state. Much of it, I used the word a little bit ago, is very aspirational, right? It's very, we're gonna kumbaya, we're gonna come together, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, or even if it's more strident, like Wilson's comments, there doesn't seem to be a long-term fiscal answer to the problems that are facing the state. And again, as you look at the 10-year forecast, you understand very precarious position if we don't do something now on that 10-year forecast.
Yeah, I think we're going to come back to that. I mean, the timing of this is we'll hit the next legislative session. We'll realize again that oil prices are down, and we'll realize again that Alaska is in a difficult spot. When you look at the 10-year forecast that DOR is going to publish next year, is going to be probably even worse as they factor in the additional the additional spending that's going to go on in the oil industry, and the impact that's going to have, the follow-on impact that's going to have on production taxes. The 10-year forecast next year is probably even going to be worse. I don't see the circumstances under which it's going to look better than the most recent 10-year forecast. So I think next year's legislative session is going to help gel, focus on fiscal policy again. And then, the question is who's positioned themselves, or who can position themselves to get a leg up on that during the election cycle. And I think it's going to be people who have thought through the issues, see that the all-in solution proposed by the Fiscal Policy Working Group has the best chance of bringing everybody together in a legislative session. Because, you recall the Fiscal Policy Working Group had members of both bodies, had members of both the majority and the minority at the time, had right-leaning Republicans, had left-leaning Democrats on the group, and they all came together in this set of recommendations. So I think those who sort of think through this and think about the circumstances that are going to apply next year in terms of where the state's going to be from a fiscal policy standpoint, I think they're going to be, having started in the process of developing their positions around the fiscal policy working group, I think they're going to have an advantage. And Shelley has an advantage on top of everybody else in that regard.
So this will be one of the main this will be one of the major questions that you're asking candidates. I'm assuming when you're talking to candidates or interviewing, or if they're asking for money or whatever, this will be one of the first questions I'm assuming that you're going to ask of many candidates on this front.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think yeah, the answer is yes. I think this is a fair way of assessing where candidates are on fiscal policy. And if they say, no, I'm not sure I would endorse that, then the follow-up question is, okay, where do you differ from it? And why do you think that works? Why do you think you can get, 21 plus 11 plus 1 for that approach that doesn't, compromise, bring together in a comprehensive plan all of the pieces? And I think a candidate's answer to that's going to be telling as well. So yeah, that'll be at the top of the list in terms of asking candidates positions on fiscal policy.
Brad, paint me a picture. If we don't pick this, the fiscal policy working group's plan, we're going to be back to this. We'll be back to the starting, it'll again be studying the study of what we've studied before. I mean, how many times do we have to come up with the same fiscal plan over and over and over again, or a different way to slice the apple, so to speak? This is just something that's got to be addressed in the state. Otherwise, it's just, again, the detriment is no PFD, now personal taxes, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah, that is where we head. And candidates who have not thought through the issue and endorse something like the all-in approach, I mean, I won't give them a whole lot of weight, because I don't think they've thought through where the state is going, where the 10-year forecast or any forecast tells us where the state is going. I don't think they're serious candidates in the sense of fiscal policy. And to me, I mean, fiscal policy is sort of at the center of the universe, right? You don't solve K through 12. You don't solve any of the other issues unless you have fiscal policy put together and you have a good sense of how many revenues you have and what caps on spending you have and how you're going to fit all the pieces together. If you don't have a good sense of that, I don't think you solve any of the other problems out there. So candidates who haven't thought through this, or who are knee jerking one way or the other without paying attention to the various factors that the working group recommendations have, I don't think they're serious candidates, and I certainly won't. Certainly won't give them a whole lot of support if I don't think they're serious on the issue.
This has been the challenge with the fiscal policy working group, is that everybody came together in kumbaya and finally made a decision and made recommendations, yet not a single one of those recommendations have crossed the finish line. Ben Carpenter, God love him, did his best to try and drag some of this stuff kicking and screaming across the finish line, and he just couldn't get it done. There was just no political will to do any of that. And that's the most disheartening part.
Yeah, I think where Ben suffered was from getting everything divided up. So he had the sales tax proposal, but it sort of stood out there by itself. It wasn't a piece of the overall solution. It was sort of its own proposal out there. And then there were, the spending cap that sort of stood by itself, and another thing stood by it. The constitutionalization of the PFD stood by itself. All pieces of the fiscal policy working group, but you didn't see it as a comprehensive whole. And I think this is one thing they said. The FPWG, the Fiscal Policy Working Group, believes the legislature must pass a comprehensive solution. FPWG members do not support addressing only one or two issues to the exclusion of others. The FPWG believes addressing these issues as a comprehensive solution solves not only a fiscal challenge, but a political challenge as well. The political challenge being that you're going to have everybody's going to oppose some piece of it. But if they see it as a comprehensive solution that's going to solve all of it, they're going to be more inclined to compromise on what they see as the most important piece, because they see it getting handled as part of the overall comprehensive solution. And I think where Ben suffered was, the governor didn't back him up. which is a problem in and of itself. But B, it was all in these various pieces. And I think to really be successful, you're going to need the governor to be behind it, a governor to be behind it. So that's why I think Shelley has a leg up in this regard with respect to the campaign. But B, it's going to have to be part of a package that is going to be a bill that will have various components to it, but a bill that you can then model and you can talk about as having a solution. I mean, Trump saw the same thing. I mean, that's why we had the one big beautiful bill, right? Because he saw that there were various pieces out there, or Mike Johnson or whoever pushed for one bill, saw that there were various pieces out there that would get wound up around the axle if you were trying to push those separately. So as part of a reconciliation package, just bring it all together, and push it as a whole. That's a pattern that I think we ought to be seeing with respect to solving the fiscal problem.
That was one of the challenges here, is that the problem was the single subject rule. Right now, my argument to that would be, this is all fiscal policy. This is all a single subject. The whole single subject is long-term fiscal planning. But the lawyers and the bean counters in there said, no, you can't do it. You have to do it individually. Those 8 or 9 points that they talk about in their fiscal plan, which include cuts, which include new oil taxes, which included new, proposed sales tax, which included, constitutionalizing the PFD and the spending cap, all those 8 points that they all finally agreed on. It was all one big, beautiful plan. And then he had to break it up because, again, they kept coming back to him saying it's a single subject rule. And that's where it got him.
Yeah. I think I've read the Eastman decision, the decision last week, in which the Supreme Court upheld an appeal by David Eastman, Supreme Court or Superior Court. Anyway, one of the courts upheld a challenge by David Eastman that the combined package done at the end of the 2024 legislature was unconstitutional because it didn't adopt the single subject rule. And I've read that. And I think that a package that you just described, particularly if pushed by the governor, particularly if outlined by the governor and by a governor and outlined as a comprehensive solution, a needed comprehensive solution, I think that would pass the single subject rule. I mean, it's sort of how you define the bill. It's sort of how you define the approach that the Supreme Court seems to rely on. And if you're picking legislation that's supposed to do different things, have sort of different motivations behind them, and stack them together, that violates the single subject rule. But I think if you have a package of legislation, while broad, nevertheless is focused on the single subject of solving the state's fiscal situation, I think that would pass the single subject rule. Part of Ben's problem was the governor never got on board, so he didn't define it as that single subject, and Ben really wasn't able to define it as the single subject. So I can see where people picked it apart, but I think there's a solution to that.
We're continuing now the weekly top three. It's the final of the weekly top three, and Brad postulates that there is quite possibly the perfect opinion piece, the perfect op-ed. He says, Brad, what do you mean? There's perhaps the perfect op-ed out there. You may have found it. It's the unicorn in the wild. What are you talking about?
Well, almost the perfect piece.
All right.
I've got one nit to pick with it, but this is an opinion piece that Kevin McCabe wrote. I don't always agree with Kevin McCabe's writings, but this one I thought was particularly good on K through 12 funding. It says Alaska's constitution does not mandate education funding, and it's good from this standpoint. And I would encourage people who haven't read it, who want to better understand the K through 12 debate, to read it. It's good in that it starts with a constitutional provision. I mean, most of the arguments around K through 12 is, the Constitution requires that we do this or that or the other thing with respect to K through 12. And Kevin, the opinion piece patiently sets out what the constitutional provision says. which says nothing about funding. And then he goes to the Moore case, which is a 2011 decision by Judge Gleason when she was on the state court, I think, that talks about what this constitutional provision means. And Kevin goes through and articulates what the Moore case said. And here's what he says. That decision outlined 4 components: rational standards, effective assessments, adequate funding, and oversight. But here's the key point, Kevin's words. The court did not say that funding alone satisfies the constitutional obligation. It said that funding must be paired with strong oversight and accountability, the 4 components. That is the part often left out of the conversation, says Kevin. So and that's right. I mean, that's what the Moore decision says. And it's important to understand the context around the adequate funding component, which is that it doesn't stand alone. There are 4 components. And when the governor or legislator say, look, we support funding, but it's in the context of making sure that we have rational standards, effective assessments, and oversight, that they're articulating the funding in the context of what the Moore decision says they have to do. That it's not just throw more and more and more money out there. It is put it in the context of these 4 components. And so I think the op-ed does a great job of articulating what the K through 12 debate is really about, and articulating where the 2 sides differ. One side is focused primarily, almost exclusively, on funding. That is, we have to have more money. We have to throw more money at the schools. We have to fill the hole that they say they have, while the other side hesitatingly says they agree to more money, but in the context of adequate standards, oversight, and the other components of the Moore decision. And the side that's saying that funding is in the context of these other components has a lot more merit to it than the side that just says more money, more money, more money, more money, more money. And I think Kevin's piece does a great job of explaining why that is and setting that up. Here's my one pick at it. Even the Republicans now say that yes, we would agree to more money. Governor says, yes, I would agree to the $200 million additional funding if, or the $200 or whatever the heck it is, $200, that I would agree to that if we do all these other components of an overhaul, comprehensive K through 12 restructuring or structuring, that I would agree to the additional money. And most of the Republicans, Mia and the others, say yes, they would agree to more money in the context of an overall plan that included additional components around assessments and around the governor's latest thing is he wants students to be able to move from one school district to another, around things like that they would agree to more money in the context of that. My nit is this: where the heck's the money supposed to come from? I mean, even if the Republicans are saying they would agree to more money if conditioned on all of these other things, and the Democrats are certainly saying more money. Where's this supposed to come from? What's the solution on the revenue side or on the fiscal side that frees up these additional funds? Because we don't have them. I mean, the only place you're going to get them is through even deeper PFD. The only place you're going to get them right now is through even deeper PFD cuts by spending more money, especially in the context of declining production tax revenues. So where's this money supposed to come from? And I think every discussion about the K through 12 issue, every discussion needs to discuss the fiscal aspects. How are we supposed to come up with this additional money? How does this fit in the context of an overall fiscal plan? Kevin will likely say, look, the ADN has a limit of 650 words. And I just didn't get it in there. I'm not asking for a whole paragraph. I'm not even asking for more than a sentence. But we need to keep all of this in the context the K through 12 issue and the other issues in the context of we don't have additional money unless we take it out of the pocket of middle and lower income Alaska families through additional PFD cuts. We just don't have it. And so we need to, every time we talk about a solution to K through 12 that involves revenue, that involves additional spending, and even the Republicans are talking about it now. Every time we talk about K through 12 resolution that involves additional spending, we need to talk about fiscal policy also. We need to at least have some mention of, oh yeah, and we need to resolve the fiscal policy issues also to come up with the additional money in a balanced way to go through K through 12 spending. So my perfect op-ed on this issue would be what Kevin had about starting with the Constitution and going through the Moore decision, but also then adding a discussion of the fiscal aspects of it, and that we need to resolve the fiscal situation at the same time as part of getting K through 12 resolved, or else we're just making the fiscal situation and the burden on middle and lower income Alaska families, the very ones that we say we're trying to help with K through 12, we're making the burden on middle and lower income Alaska families even worse because we aren't solving the money issue at the same time.
Well, and that's always been the challenge is, again, the answer for the one side is just more money, no matter what, more money. And Kevin is rightly pointing out that the Constitution says we provide public education, but it was the Moore decision that said we had to fund it. But again, they keep dropping these other two components, the accountability, the oversight, that kind of stuff. But the biggest question that, again, I come back to every time they scream more is, where does it come from? That's the thing. We it seems like that doesn't matter to them. Anybody you discuss with, it doesn't matter. Wherever it has to come from, whoever has to be hurt, wherever it has to, and that's, again, it's not a solution. Kevin is at least saying these are the four things that the Moore decision said. We need to use all these in conjunction. Now, where does the money come from? That's obviously a bigger and deeper subject, but something that most people don't want to touch on. We talked about that earlier.
It is a bigger and deeper subject, but to me, it's the key subject. I mean, all we're doing, if we solve K through 12 by taking additional PFD cuts, which is right now what we would have to do, all we're doing is making another problem worse. Without solving the overall fiscal issue, we're by giving more money to Peter out of Paul's pocket, we're just making the problems with Paul worse. So I understand that sort of like the single subject bill, right? You got to stick on the subject. You got to solve what's in front of you. But one of the pieces of solving what's in front of you about K through 12 is the fiscal issue of where the heck this additional money is supposed to come from. Because we're not talking about it. I mean, we're not talking about it just this 1 year. The governor's line item veto makes it a 1 year issue, but the legislation passed. It's permanent. I mean, it goes on the books and sets up a higher BSA on a permanent basis. So yes, we resolved the $200 this year, however that plays out in the budget. But it shows up next year, the year after that, the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. It's not a 1 year problem. It is a multi-year problem. And so if we're going to solve this, you've got to solve on a long-term basis, you've got to solve the fiscal situation on a long-term basis, or else it just keeps popping up as another problem next year and another problem the year after that and another problem the year after that.
I mean, you're right. The fiscal policy is the cornerstone of any plan for anything that we're talking about. Anything that has to be built, it has to be built on a sound fiscal plan. And the problem is there's no political will to put a fiscal plan in place because somebody's ox is going to get gored somewhere along the lines on this deal.
Yeah. And that's why, to go back to the second segment, that's why I think Shelley's got a leg up in the campaign by saying, I've been there. I've dealt with this issue. It didn't get done under the last governor. Under the current governor, he didn't get behind it. He didn't endorse a comprehensive solution. I'm running on it. I've been there. I've been in the middle of this. I've seen all of the sides of it. I've seen how to get to a solution, and that's what I'm running on. And I think candidates for the legislature, and I think candidates for other candidates for governor ought to be doing it as well. But Shelley's position, because she was on that working group, Shelley's position, I think, to really make a great push on it. And I hope she does. I mean, it may be that she thinks that, I mean, part of it is revenues, right? And it may be that she thinks, well, I can't talk about revenues because that's going to take away from, the base that I need to support me to get into the top four and that sort of stuff. And that'd be sad because then the candidate that ought to be talking about the most about the working group recommendations wouldn't, because she's been, taken off by one of these sub issues. So I hope other candidates talk about it as well. Shelley doesn't, but I think this is the key to solving the fiscal policy issues that we're facing. I think this is the fiscal policy issues we're facing are the key to solving the other issues we're facing. I mean, people say we don't have enough infrastructure. We don't have the money for it. People say we don't fund K through 12 enough. We don't have the money for it. And you can just go on down the list. And until we get fiscal policy set and resolved and the issues around it sort of tightened up, I don't think we're going to solve any of these other things. People are just going to keep arguing about, we don't have enough money for this, or we don't have enough money for that, or we ought to be doing this, or we ought to be doing that. All of that involves money. And until we have that straightened out, it's just going to continue to go in a circle.
Do you think that candidates are avoiding the issue of the fiscal thing because they simply think that the public doesn't want to hear about it? Is it too hard an issue? I mean, what do you think? What's the reason why a lot of these fiscal topics don't get touched, do you think?
Oh, I think, and I would certainly be interested on what candidates themselves think, but I think it's because they're trying to appeal to subsections of the electorate as their base to get into the top four, and they are wary of endorsing something or saying something that their base is going to go off on and attack them on. I mean, Ben Carpenter. Let's look at Ben. Ben endorsed sales taxes, and Jesse Bjorkman beat him over the head with it down in the Kenai Senate race, and Ben lost that primary, or lost that race, because of the way in which Bjorkman used the sales tax issue. So I think candidates are wary of their opponents or of their base picking out one issue from the comprehensive solution and saying, well, if you endorse the comprehensive solution, you must endorse this, and if you endorse this, that's wrong. Because now you're endorsing revenues, you're endorsing taxes, and I don't want a taxer in the governor's office. So the candidates have to be prepared to say it's one component. Look what you're getting. You're getting a constitutional PFD. You're getting a spending cap. You're getting, and go on down through the list of the other pieces that offset the impact of the one piece of revenues. And I think candidates need to be prepared to do that. But I think they're concerned that parts of that a part of their base that they feel they need are going to pick out that one issue and beat them over the head with that one issue. I mean that happened to the representative up in Matsu that we were talking about last week. I mean, she endorsed Senator Yunt's resolution on, or proposed revenues on, the digital tax, the proposed revenues coming from the digital tax. She endorsed that, and her district starts beating her. District Republican committee starts beating on her. I mean, that is one piece of a comprehensive solution, but they pick out that piece and start beating on her about it. That's just wrong. I mean, that's why I gave her $2,000, because that's just wrong. We've got to get to a solution. We've got to have a comprehensive solution that has multiple pieces, and we need to support candidates that talk about those multiple pieces, as opposed to people who want to pick one of them and beat them over the head about it.
Again, as far as legislatively, I mean, the single subject rule is really what kind of submarine this whole deal. Because again, my argument is this is all about a fiscal policy. I don't know why that argument can't be made, that these are all part and pieces. I mean, the constitutional provision has to be standalone because it's a separate bill. I mean, that's required to be a separate bill. but everything else could be in one comprehensive package as a, like an omnibus type bill that deals with fiscal policy, because every one of those components is dealing with fiscal policy. So I don't know if it is the bureaucracy that's pushing back on this, whether, legal or who, I don't know. But to me, it's like this is all this is all part of a whole here, and you can't just pick each one out. And in fact, they in their own report, and they talk about this. You can't take this one piece at a time. It has to be a holistic approach. That was their belief, and they started out with that, and they ended with that. Yep. In their thing. It's it must pass a comprehensive solution, is what they say, and that's part of the problem. All right, Brad, we got to go. Thanks so much for coming on board. It's good to talk with you, my friend. Thanks for being part of it today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me. Well, that's a wrap for another week's edition of the weekly top 3 from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you again for joining us. Remember that you can find past episodes on our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, and keep track of us during the week on Facebook and Twitter. This has been Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We look forward to you joining us again next week on the weekly top 3.